And that moves us to F2, request by Councilmember Mueller to modify the city code relating to purchasing authority.
There's a staff report. Is there a staff member who wants to speak to it, Alex, or do you want to speak to it?
Sorry, I certainly can.
City Attorney.
So Councilmember Mueller in late December sent an email to Mayor Carlton requesting that this agenda item be put before the council for consideration, or to bring something back before the council for future consideration. And it's the idea of, and Councilmember Mueller, please correct me if I misstate this or mischaracterize this. It's the idea of looking at a way through a code amendment of limiting the city manager's purchasing authority with regards to public relations and/or communications. And again, typical of how the council works, Councilmember Mueller is bringing this to the council's attention tonight, and the direction would be, if there's consensus, if there's agreement to do so, directing the city attorney to come back with that code amendment for introduction and ultimate adoption.
Right, and I think we need to get some definition around communications. I think it was media, PR consultant, and media consultant. But I really think we can obviously discuss this at a policy level. I don't want to get into the parameters of what may have happened into the past, because there are still issues outstanding on that. But the real issue, and for me debate-wise with you all, and you can tell me your thoughts on this, is I'm looking at this from a level of transparency with the public. When there's a policy matter that's taking place in public discourse, and the city is going to be hiring a consultant to message during that time period, I think it's important to let the public know that's occurring in a transparent effort. Whether that be that we limit the authority of the city manager to do that pursuant to a vote of the city council, or whether or not we say, for the transparency purpose, that at the time the city manager contracts with the person, that they need to give notice to the city council and open a public meeting. For me, what I really want to have happen is that there is notice to the public and to the council in an open and public meeting that can't be missed, that this has occurred. So it's not something that's discovered later, as may have been experienced in the past. So I will go ahead and pass it on to others for comment.
Councilmember Klein.
Yeah, appreciate this being brought up. It's a little awkward for me to comment on it, because I do this in the private sector. And I think you have to be either broaden this. There's so many different titles for what this function is that there's a limit. You can just find yourself at odds with what this is called. I mean, it could be not even comms or PR. It just could be somebody that does strategy in general, and this is the job. So I think you have to make something like this be. I don't think that that there should be let's just say a hiring of consultants that are going to advise campaigns or actions that may be running against the taxpayers of the city, and that would create a discipline of looking at many different functions, because you can get advice in many different ways. There's many different ways that I think you can slice this. And I do think if you say PR comms and try to broaden it, you're still going to be limited by what that is. So it needs to be stated out in the intent of the hiring and what we're trying to do with that hire, if we're trying to limit that down. It could even be as easy as saying, I think whenever we hire somebody, maybe there needs to be a public announcement so that we know they're hired, no matter what it is. And then there's a public notice of it. It doesn't mean they're asking for approval, but it definitely needs to be public.
Yeah. So the issue for me on this one is real. So to give you guys some thought on my thinking on this, is that the issue on me is this, is that when there's communications being transmitted to the public on a policy matter, so there's the instances where we all might be in agreement on come to a collaboration on a policy, but there may be instances where we don't, where it's 3-2 or it's 2-3, or maybe the city has a different opinion than the council. In those circumstances, when there is the potential that a PR or media consultant could be hired, I think it's just incumbent for transparency purposes that everyone be notified of that, so that we're aware there is a messaging effort from an independent consultant taking place, so we can ask questions. It's not necessarily that anything that's happening is illegal or untoward or something's wrong, but it's just the fact that good public policy requires transparency so those questions can be asked and followed up upon. If they're not, then you can find yourself later having to go through that analysis again and trying to piece together when you could have cleared it up in the beginning. And
I think we're in agreement.
We are,
I just
yeah.
think it's if you look at what the type of people hired these days, it's not always in this classification. Sometimes it's legislative experts, who come in and run public affairs and do consulting. It's such a range now. I mean, you could go to Facebook and you wouldn't even know which one does what from the 10 different people they hired, but it's all kind of the same, right? It's the idea of, the narrative, controlling the message, being strategic about the response, all the different pieces. So I don't want to make sure we don't limit it. If we're going to do it, there needs to be a way to do it so that we have it covering all the different areas. And when I thought about it, I didn't have a good recommendation tonight of what that would be, and so I thought maybe there's a way we just make it so that there's a step in this process of hiring where it can just be public and we know it, and we have the option of asking questions. I don't know how to do that, but I think that might be easier.
for a consultant, any consultant.
Councilmember Keith.
Thanks. I think I have a couple of questions actually for Bill. On this, I think we know where this stemmed from. This came from what was spoken about earlier, Malcolm Smith's contract. So if we're looking at it as something that came out of an issue, otherwise this wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be talking about it. So I'm just curious, Bill, would you mind talking about laws that cities must follow as far as transparency with when there is a measure on the ballot and what those laws require? Aren't there laws that are in place now?
Certainly. There are elections code sections that limit what cities, public agencies can do. They can't advocate for or against a measure, and they're entitled to communicate information about the measure that is, to inform the public, but not to advocate for or against. That's essentially the rule.
And those are enforceable laws?
They are enforceable laws.
And if a city were to violate those laws, that would be something that could be enforced against the city?
Correct. There's actions that could be taken for violating or not complying with those laws against, the city or individuals.
Okay. When I look at this and I see that it does stem out of a particular incident right now with Measure M, and we've got Mr. Robinson in the audience still, and I know, he has his Public Record Act request that he's still waiting for, and I understand, why this came up, but I'm not sure. I don't think it's the right thing to do at this time, and I'm not sure it's the right thing to do at any time. But there are laws in place that do control what cities may and may not do concerning measures, ballot measures, and a city may not advocate on behalf of something. So I'm not comfortable with this. I appreciate having the discussion and talking about it, and it would be unprecedented. Is that right, Mr. McClure, you wrote the two-page staff report.
What Rich is requesting is not unprecedented in Santa Clara County whenever any
I just had a
person is
question.
hired.
I'm sorry, I wasn't quite done. But I was just wondering, did you write the staff report, Mr. McClure?
No, I did not.
Did you, Mr. McIntyre? And in the staff report on the analysis on page 141, did you write that it would be unprecedented in Menlo Park to add this additional layer?
Sorry. I did write that in the notion of sort of as policy, city manager's authority, staff's authority is typically limited on cost, not necessarily on topic or subject matter. And so I just wanted to point that out. So it is unprecedented in Menlo Park. I cannot speak to any other city or county in the state of California on that topic.
Right, just speaking to Menlo Park.
Correct.
Only, right. Yeah, so those are my thoughts on that.
Okay, Peter?
Yeah, so I had asked Alex earlier to provide me a copy of the original resolution passed by the council in 2008, which is the authorizing of the city manager's purchasing authorization. It would be my recommendation that this is where you make the change, not as a code. And I think I'm even more convinced because I think you two seem to have some understanding of, and I'm not sure I really understood.
Yeah,
you
I
know,
think I can explain what's going on, is that
Yeah.
it's no longer, I think Rich and I have reached this, and I reached it over the course since my first email. I think Rich is there too. It's not any longer that we would limit his purchasing authority, because then we get into some other areas too, frankly, with respect to what. But the idea is that he would have to report out, the city manager would have to report out new hires. Basically, if there's a consulting contract that is entered into, that there would be a report out. These are the consulting contracts for this amount for this subject matter.
Yeah.
So it's not something that's discovered later, and it's not unprecedented in Santa Clara County. Anytime a FTE is hired in any department, there is a report out in the agenda of that Board of Supervisors meeting that you look at. You can keep track of the fact that it's happening, or if they're adding, not when they're hired, if you're adding a position. So what we'd be doing here is we would just have a report out that these are the consultants that have been hired on these subject topics, a consultant on this subject area for this amount of money. And in that way, we're not impeding our city manager's authority to do that, but if we have questions or an issue, or if the public wants to know about it, it's very easily and identifiable. It's not a surprise to anyone.
Councilmember Otak?
Yeah, so I would be supportive of a report out or disclosure provision, but I would like it to be part of a, resolution tied to this purchasing authority, essentially a policy level as opposed to, because we may want to tweak it, adjust it. It's harder to do that when you put it in an ordinance, and you may not get it right the first shot. So I'd like to recommend that let's have it come back as a policy, and that gives us a chance to debate it, amend it. So.
I have a question for Mr. McClure. Will codifying this make it a criminal act, make it a crime to hire a communications consultant and not tell the city council?
It depends on what you're doing. So if you're amending the ordinance and you're prohibiting certain conduct and there's a violation of the conduct, it can be treated as a misdemeanor or an infraction, depending on how the ordinance sets it up. But
Right.
if it's just silent on it, then it could be treated as a misdemeanor.
Okay, so my question, I'm leaning towards the policy level because it kind of seems like using a nuclear bomb for something that could use a hammer.
Well, it depends upon whether or not.
Let me speak, please. Sorry.
Well, I think you're being argumentative when you could set up an ordinance so that it's not a misdemeanor.
Actually, I'm just asking questions.
Well, by calling it a nuclear bomb when it hasn't been set up that way, I think it's argumentative, needlessly.
So I'm stating an opinion.
I just
And
would
I
ask
have-
it be based in fact.
I will state my opinions as I see them.
Okay.
So, reining in the metaphor, I believe it's heavy-handed. Fair?
It depends upon the ordinance, how it's
So-
crafted. I think that's what Bill said.
I believe that I'm talking about doing this at a policy level, where, and I agree with Councilmember Klein, and I think we've even talked about this before in previous issues, where we have a report out on all HR hires, where we just have a list, we get a report every week, and let us know what HR hires we have, and also I would be interested to know what we have open, so that we have an idea on what's happening in HR. And it kind of comes down to this. Alex, I think what you're hearing is that we all want you to report to us when you hire a communications consultant, or basically any consultant. You know, being cognizant that I'm being recorded, I think that that can be rolled into your job requirements. And if you don't do that, then that calls in you doing your job correctly, and we move forward on that when we review your work for the city. And I agree with Peter that I absolutely want to see more transparency. Absolutely. Now, remember, guys, that when we did our council goal setting like we did yesterday, one of the key issues that we put forward is that we wanted to improve communications. We wanted to improve communications for transparency, for clarity, for all this. And then we were also very clear that he wasn't allowed to hire a new FTE because we were reining in the people working. So it's not a shocker that he hired a consultant, a communications consultant. I wish I'd known, and I think we've all made it very, very clear that in the future we would like to know. And I think that we go back to the policy level as you described, and include an HR report, whether that be monthly or weekly. It would be good to have a report so that we and the residents have complete clarity on who's being hired and what positions we have open and what's happening on the HR front. For this issue, and Councilmember Keith is right, this has come out of one issue, but there have been other issues about hiring and open spaces and this and that, that it would be beneficial to the City Council, it would be beneficial to the general public to have that clarity and have that transparency on what's happening on the HR front. Would you have a problem including that in a weekly report or a monthly report, giving us an HR report, Alex?
So HR meaning human resources, like you just said, hirings, vacancies, and
Hiring,
whatnot?
vacancies. Yeah.
Absolutely no problem doing that.
And that would include when you hire a consultant or an interim person. Shoot, I'd even be interested to know when you're bringing on a student who's working
Like
with us.
an intern?
An intern.
Sure.
Yeah. You want to? Would you like to?
It's just formatted to make it simple. I don't want to create a headache. It's just put it in the form. It's the person, what the subject is, right? And then it's in like almost like Excel boxes. And here's the updated.
If it's the council's pleasure, I can bring back a template of sort of what I might be referring to and let you guys decide if you think that's
Right.
communicating sufficiently for what the information you need. So I'm happy to do that.
I know we would like that. I'm looking at heads nodding. We can vote on that. But it is, I do believe that I believe that everyone on this dais' heart is in the right place, and we want to do the right thing, and we want to have transparency, and we want to build the trust with the people of Menlo Park. And I think this is a good step forward to start building up that trust. That's my take on it.
I'm nodding. Okay.
Okay. Sorry. Councilmember Mueller, did you want to?
I just want to think that we need to work through very carefully within the policy what the description is that is attached to the subject matter, because where we go down this path and it becomes a problem is that I could foresee a circumstance where a person is hired and then a description put in, and because it's become so rote that these flow through, that a description that's been used in this past is just stamped on, this is what this person does, and then later there's a discovery, oh wait, we didn't know that person was working in this subject area. So I think that we really would request that within the policy, and I'll leave it to our esteemed city attorney to work out some specificity and some guidelines for that, but I think it's really important that it be descriptive enough that there can be no inadvertent errors in the future. And I also want to make clear too that my reason for bringing this subject matter tonight was not a passing of judgment yet on any factor. It was more about setting expectations about how we go forth in the future, and I think that's frankly very important for people to understand. I'm still processing all of the information, frankly holding off on processing a lot of information until we have some other resolutions on the issue. So I appreciate the professionalism of staff in being open to me bringing this subject matter tonight for us to talk about. There's been nothing but professional. When I raised it, worked through it, talked about it with me, it was not defensive. And I think we're getting to a point where we're going to have more transparency within our city, which is a positive result.
Councilmember Klein? Yeah, this kind of goes back to conversations that we have time and time again, which is that balance between letting us know everything that's going on and providing a 50-page report. And I completely agree with what you say. I would add to that the nuance of if you think it's going to be controversial in any way, shape, or form, just bring it to our attention so we're aware of it. And sometimes something that may first appear mundane becomes controversial. But our guidance is, if you think it's going to come up, just let us know. Bring it to our attention. Say this might be nothing. This might actually come of something. In any way we can, as we're drafting this, and also in considering the intent of drafting this. It's all about transparency, and it's all about bringing to our attention things that we might take special interest in. So I have a card, Hayward Robinson.
Thank you, Hayward Robinson. I wasn't going to speak on this, but I want to thank Ray for bringing this to your attention. I think it's an important discussion to have. It's a natural tension. Every council wrestles with this struggle of how do you communicate with your constituents. You're always frustrated that you're doing all this great work and nobody knows about it and it's all misunderstood. The city feels the same way. And so it's nothing new. You're not the first to experience this and struggle with this. And then there's all these people out there saying things. And it happens. To Ms. Keith, you mentioned that the staff report, and the staff report said this was unprecedented. I'll point out that we didn't learn about Malcolm Smith until Halloween, October 31st of this year. He'd been working for the city since at least the 1st of March, months and months. The votes were already in. Measure M had already lost. You'd already been reelected by the absentee ballots that had already been submitted by that point. So voters didn't have that information. So whatever checks and balances were there, there are laws. They did not prevent the city from hiring Mr. Smith and doing the things that they did. And I would say, and others would say, the actions of the city in this case were unprecedented. And so it is appropriate for you all to take this up. It certainly is. I think where you're going with this it makes sense. There's always a tension. You don't want to over micromanage the city. You don't want to put too many restrictions on your city manager. But you do need transparency. You do need that. And I would recommend that all contracts be public, easily accessible, easily found on the website, searchable. And what they're there for, what their amount is, why they're there. So it just adds to your transparency. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a motion? Or do we want to just give direction?
I believe we need a motion, and we need a drafting of this new resolution by the city attorney, right?
Well, I was going to ask for clarity. And so that we make sure that we know what the expectation is.
Do you want to send a subcommittee out just to draft this with you and then bring it back for approval by council?
Well, my question is, are we really talking about amending the purchasing policy? Because we have a whole bunch of policies on purchasing system, and the city manager is directed to develop and bring back to you, in our code, is directed to bring back to you periodically purchasing policies, procedures, limits, and functions. And we have a purchasing policy. That would be an appropriate place that if we are entering into contracts for services, if you want them reported out, to include language in the purchasing policy that goes along with other purchases. If that's really what you're talking about.
That's what you were
yes.
saying, Peter?
I guess the devil's in the
Yes, exactly.
details. I guess the devil's in the details of how often the report
I understand. So we'll give you options so that you can determine what that is, but I think that's probably the appropriate place to include it in that policy. This would not relate to employees. That's a different issue because that's not within the purchasing policy. So what I would envision is that this is a, contractor consultant, independent contractor consultant kind of reporting when we enter into those contracts that are within the city manager's or department's authority, that those would be reported out, and we'll include what that would be and possibly a format of what that might be, and then you can decide if that's adequate or if you want more.
Okay. Councilmember Keith?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I had a couple of questions for you, Mr. McClure, just based on thank you, Mr. Robinson, for your comments. I appreciate them. And just out of curiosity, Mr. McClure, did you review the contract with Mr. Malcolm Smith?
No, I've had a conflict of interest in dealing with Measure M, and so I completely was recused, not involved in reviewing, the ballot argument or any contracts or anything that was written about Measure M or anything. And so to the extent that it was reviewed, it would have been reviewed by Greg Stepanisic, who was the attorney who was retained to consult with the city council, city staff regarding Measure M and all things Measure M.
Thank you. And Mr. McIntyre, did you receive any information from Mr. Stepanisic?
So yes, I'm going to actually modify the city attorney's comments. We actually originally hired Greg Rubens to be the special counsel for this, and we ran into a conflict with him, and so we removed him, and we brought Greg Stepanisic in, who ultimately served as special counsel on this topic. So the answer to your question, Councilmember Keith, yes, we did bring in Greg Stepanisic to review. He was a part of the process all along, and he was the legal eyes for all the decisions that were being made at the time. So.
And did he give you any advice as to whether or not what the city did was appropriate or not?
Well, Councilmember Keith, I'm just
going to have
well,
a few
you're
more
a criminal
questions.
defense attorney, number one. Number two, there's a DA. The DA's asked us to please, while this investigation is taking place.
That's true.
That's
Let's stay on topic.
Yeah, so that's why I was wondering why this was even brought at this point in time, because have we even heard back from the district attorney's office?
I think that let's not go there, frankly, because we're not supposed to talk about it, and let's stay on the topic of, I think this was brought forward in the spirit of transparency.
Right, and I think,
And
I'll just make a
reporting.
couple of comments on that. I think the transparency is key, and I'm all for it, and I'm happy to look at this. I think the timing is probably not as good as it could have been. I think that we really should have some information back from the DAs before this is all sort of resolved. But I think transparency is very important, and of course we want everybody to know what the city's doing, what the city's working on, and that is key. So I'm happy to do that, happy to work on that. I think the timing on this is probably, it's too early.
Councilmember Mueller.
Irrespective of irrespective of what may happen with anything else that's happening, irrespective of anything else that may happen, I believe that it's important to learn from past events, and regardless of whatever outcome may be of any investigation related to anything related to the underlying events of Measure M, I think this is a smart policy going forward because it captures what I think was a breakdown in transparency during the process, because as mayor, in retrospect, I would like to have known. I want to be clear. In some respect, I just want to make it very clear what the expectation is, not just for this city manager, but future city managers. I want to make clear what the expectation is going forward for good, sound, transparent public policy in our city. It's not necessarily related to anything that was done correctly or incorrectly in the past in terms of the legality of it. It's what is good, transparent public policy going forward for our city in matters that related to the hiring of consultants, and that could touch upon topics that are, for me, it was initially just speaking to issues of communicating to the public policy. But I think we've expanded that appropriately now so that there's no parsing of words, and that there's no potential, we're not potentially going to miss anything. I think we've just expanded it correctly. But this has nothing to do with the legality of, or illegality of past practices. This is just good, sound public policy.
Councilmember Otake.
So I don't know if we need a resolution or whether this was direction, but if we do need a resolution, I'm happy to put one forward, which I think I've heard some...
You mean a motion?
A motion, sorry. That's right, thank you. A motion to ask our city attorney to draft language related to the city manager's purchasing authorization that has options regarding reporting of contracts for us to review at when ready. So
I'll second that and add the policy, right? We're looking at the actual purchasing policy.
Policy, correct.
And as it pertains to consultants and contractors, or contracts and consultants, broadly. Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to support that because I like the word broadly in it. I think that's important.
Call the question.
The motion passes unanimously.